everybody, welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, Kristina. This is where we read book, talk about books, watch Star Trek, talk about Star Trek. I'm in this series. I like to have the character progression from episode to episode or book to book, same thing. I have this fantasy. It's not going very well, although those of you who have subscribed, I really appreciate it. But I was hoping for a Christmas miracle of 1,000 subscribers. I've got a little over 140 now. It's been a year. So I'm hoping for that miracle, and you're the only one that can do it. The ball is in your court. It's all up to you. So we have moved on to the next disc. We are in season 4. We are on disc 4. This is episode 187, Devil's Due. Next week we'll do 188, Clues. Maybe a Sherlock Holmes situation. We'll have to see. 189, First Contact. I wonder if that's the one with what's that guy's name? And the one that drinks a lot, and the Borg and the Vulcans. And 190, Galaxy's Child. So we'll be doing that in the coming weeks. It's always on Fridays, so please check us out for Flashback Mondays and Star Trek Fridays and all the book reviews in between. One day I'll figure out how to get my co-host in this too. I haven't figured it out yet. But she's here. Just so you know, she's here. Anyways, she's here. She's just not on screen. I haven't figured out. If you watch the book reviews, Flashback Monday, we had a special treat at the end, so check that out. So we start this episode with no overview this time. We are first I wanted to say, and I guess I really shouldn't say it now, I should probably wait till it comes, but it was just my first initiation, and I looked it up and I couldn't find anything to support my position. But I thought Ardra had been a name used in SG1. I was wrong. I was associating with Claudia Black. She did have a daughter named Ardra who was consumed by the Ori. But I was thinking of when she pretended to be a god, a Goa'uld god, but it was a different name, so it didn't count. And then I was thinking that maybe on the Journeys of Hercules, there might have been one there, but I was wrong about that too. So who knows? I'm wrong quite a bit. So we'll see what happens. It's kind of appropriate for this time of year, I guess, that we're doing this one. But Data is trying out his acting skills, and he is playing Ebenezer Scrooge. And we've got our ghosts of Christmas present and past and future. And Picard is watching on. You don't believe in me. Data says, I don't. Molly says, what evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses? Data says, I don't know. Molly says, why do you doubt your senses? Data says, because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than grave about you. Whatever you are, humbug, I tell you, humbug. So then Picard, who's been watching it, says, freeze program. Very well done, Data. Your performance skills really are improving. Data says, your courtesy is appreciated, sir, but I am aware that I do not effectively convey the fear called for in this story. Picard says, well, you've never known fear, Data, but as an acute observer of behavior, you should be able to approximate it. Data says, that is not an appropriate basis for effective performance, not by the standards set by my mentors. Picard says, your mentors? Yes, sir. I have studied the philosophies of virtually every known acting master. but I find myself particularly attracted to Stanislavski Adler proponents of a performance technique known as the method. Picard says, method acting. I'm vaguely familiar with it, but why would you choose such an old fashioned approach? Data says perhaps the technology requires an actor to seek his own emotional awareness to understand the character he plays. Um, Picard says, but surely that's an impossible task for you. Data. Data says, sir, I've modified the method for my own uses. Since I have no emotional awareness to create a performance, I am attempting to use performance to create an emotional awareness. I believe if I can learn to duplicate the fear of Ebenezer Scrooge, then I will be one step closer to truly understanding humanity. You think Brett Spinner liked dressing up and stuff like that? You think he liked doing all these extra bits? I think so. I think he wouldn't have pursued it if they didn't. But do you think was this a Christmas episode? I have no idea what date. I should have looked it up. But Riker breaks in their convo and says he's on his way to the bridge. And Picard says one more thing. The moment you decided to stop imitating other actors and to create your own interpretation, you were already one step closer to understanding humanity. Um, Worf said, right at the Riker says, we received an emergency transmission from the science station Ventrax 2, sir. Picard said, nature of emergency. Riker says, uncertain, the signal was interrupted. Worf says, contact reestablished with Ventrax 2, Commander. Riker says, on screen. All right, I would like to point out that we have two extras who get front and center FaceTime. They also get to interact with the main cast members. Hey, I was on Star Trek. I got to sit in the front. You definitely saw me. I may not have had any lines, which I think they would be kind of jealous because Ensign Allaby had lines. Although he does get a little extra when Ardra takes him over and he gets a little acting reaction to being taken over. So that's extra. He still doesn't have any lines. But still, here you are in these chairs, in these uniforms, on Star Trek Next Generation, up front and center where all your friends can see you. Kudos. Just saying. So Worf says, Dr. Howard Clark appears. I'm Dr. Howard Clark, director of the science station here on Ventex 2. Thank you for responding. Picard says, Lieutenant Worf, can you improve on the reception? Worf says, the trouble is at the transmission source, sir. Picard says, Dr. Clark can barely maintain communications with you. Can you boost the level of your power source? Dr. Clark says, I'm afraid not, Captain. It's under attack. Under attack? Dr. Clark says, yeah, there's a mob outside trying to break into the station. The planet is in chaos, looting, fires, mass hysteria. These people are all convinced their world is coming to an end tomorrow. Please, we must have your immediate, and things get cut off. Then we get a captain's overview. Captain's log stardate 4474.5. We have reached Ventex 2 and are attempting to contact the Federation Science Station, which at last report was under siege by an angry mob. Worf says they are transmitting again. Picard says on screen before we lose contact. Dr. Clark says emergency, emergency. Do you read me? Emergency. We need help. Now, apparently, and I looked this up a little bit. The terminology used in the 1940s during World War II is still being used several hundred years from now. I don't understand why a person would say, do you read me, instead of saying, do you hear me? Apparently the answer is, I read you loud and clear, and Roger that, or Roger Wilco, means received and will comply. I just thought I'd look that up because it was interesting that something that was done in the 1940s is still being used in Star Trek time. Picard says, Dr. Clark, this is Captain Picard. We are ready to beam you and your team aboard them. Dr. Clark says, they're in. Picard says, Transporter Room 3, lock onto the science team, beam them aboard. Transporters, officers, convoys, I've locked onto the Dr. Clark. I can't pick out the others. It's a mess down there. Where is Miles O'Brien? He had 2 episodes in a row where he played a prominent part of the episode, and now he's disappeared. He is referred to, though, but he is not seen during this episode. So we'll have to see if he shows up again in the season. Picard says, beam up Dr. Clark by himself. Mr. Worf, will you escort him to my ready room? Worf says, aye, sir. Picard says, number 1, try to make sense of this mess. Now, I didn't see Data walk in. I didn't see him walk in before, but I wanted to. It's in my notes, but I said it already. But I'm going to say it again. Bragging rights. So he gets a couple of scenes, and the other guy gets a couple of scenes. They get a couple of scenes together, and then they get a couple of single scenes. Equal. Interesting. They're in Picard's ready room. Dr. Clark says the people of Ventex 2 live in an agrarian society. At least they do now. Picard says, what do you mean now? Clark says, this is an interesting anthropological question. One we were studying before the trouble began. In their distant past, the Ventaxian culture had achieved an extremely advanced scientific level, but a millennium ago they turned their backs on technology. Picard said they reverted to a simpler existence. Dr. Clark says, and remained that way for centuries. First contact was made by the Klingons expedition 70 years ago. Since then, new technology has been available to the Vectaxians. They are simply not interested in it. There are virtually no social problems to be found on this planet. In fact, I would have described their society as idyllic until Dr. Claude says it's hard to believe several years ago, Akash Jara, the Vexen head of state, began to grow increasingly obsessed with the legend of Ardra. With each passing day, he grew more anxious until he talked about little else. Ardra is coming back. Ardra will be here soon. We must all leave before Ardra returns. Picard says, who is Ardra? Dr. Clark says, for all intents and purposes, the devil, Captain. These people actually believe they've sold their souls to the devil. Riker's voice comes over the comm. Riker to Captain Picard. Picard says, have you located the science team number 1? Riker says, evidently they've been held hostage. Dr. Clark says, hostage. Riker says, we have a Vectaxian leader on the view screen, name of Akash Jared. Wow. All of a sudden, Troy shows up. Like, all of a sudden, you see these people show up. But look at all the extra time this guy's getting, but no lines. So Dr. Clark says, Jared, you must secure the release of my people. I can't believe you would allow this. Jared says, Howard, my friend, you know how I abhor all acts of violence, but events are out of my control. Picard says, I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Is there nothing you can do? Jared says, at this hour, Aja's return approaches. Fear has overwhelmed my people. It has been 1,000 years. The prophecies have come true. Picard says, prophecies. Dr. Clark says, Aja's arrival is supposed to be heralded by the shaking of the cities. There have been a series of geological tremors on the planet. Minor quakes, nothing extraordinary, because it was poorly timed. Jared says there is more. For several nights, there have been visions of Ardra again, just as the contract said would occur before her return. Picard says, visions? Do you mean dreams? Jared says, no, she has appeared. I myself have seen her. Picard says, Jared, tell your people if our hostages are released, I am prepared to offer the Federation assistance with this Ardra return. Jared says, I'm afraid it will not matter. They know your weapons are useless against her, Captain. I will make inquiries concerning the hostages. The innocent should not suffer for our sins, but I can make no promises. So then they're all in the observation lounge. And Beverly doesn't say much during this one. A lot of them don't say anything. So Troy says, this situation is deteriorating, Captain. People are approaching levels of anxiety that could lead to suicide. Picard says, Mr. Data, what do we know about this Ardra? Data says she is a cornerstone of Ventaxian technology. It seems that Ardra came to Ventex 2 and promised 1,000 years of peace and prosperity for a price upon her return and enslaved the entire population. In the Ventexian culture, it is considered bad luck to speak her name out loud. Dr. Clark says there's an ancient scrolls concerning Ardra that are stored in the Antheum vault. Scholars study them. They have been of little public interest until recently. Picard says, I think I should meet with this Akash Jarrett. He is still our best hope for the release of the hostages. Riker says, I will arrange to have him transported to port. Picard says, no, I'm going down there. Worf says, you run the risk of being taken as an additional hostage, sir. Picard says, Mr. Worf, you and Mr. Data will accompany me. Mr. O'Brien can keep a lookout on a lock on our communications. He can pull us out if necessary. But you never see O'Brien. You never see him. Worf says, yes, sir. Picard says, Counselor, I want you to come too. So Picard, Worf, Troy, and Data materialize. The entries are posted at the door. Jared and the small Beta circles move in. Picard says, Jared says, Captain Picard, you shouldn't have come. Your life is in danger here. Picard says, Jared, you must attempt to calm your people. There is no reason for panic. Jared says, no reason. Picard says, if the tremors have frightened people leading this hysteria over Ardra, let us reassure them. Data says, we have scanned the tectonic stress patterns of your planet's crust. There is no evidence that quakes pose any kind of threat. Jared says, no. The threat is from Ardra. You cannot understand. Picard says, if you can at least help us locate our people. Jared says, she is here. Picard says, nonsense. It is only... You know, these people are... This Jared guy, most of all, is so massively brainwashed. You know, how come it's always killing or destroying or bombing or that kind of stuff? How come someone doesn't come in and go, how about I will let you live completely for free? No health insurance is free, and food will be free, and all this stuff will be free. No one ever says that stuff. No one, they always come in and go, and everything will be equal. I'll get rid of racism. I'll get rid of poverty. No, they all come in and when they want to bomb and they want to kill. Well, if you kill thousands of people, that's 1,000 people less for your armies, less for you to rule on. So you had a couple of thousand in your population and you bomb and kill them all. Who the hell are you ruling? If you're going to be king, you want to be king of a lot. You don't want to be king of 5 people. And to kill them all is not a way to get them just to fall into your rule. I'd rather kill with kindness than whatever. Anyway. Ardra says, I am disappointed. I expected my tenants to take better care of my property. Oh, that was another thing. Does that not resemble the Catwoman suit from the late 60s Batman and Robin TV show? Does that not look like Batgirl's little costume or Catwoman's costume from the movies? I'm just saying. Jared says, I'm the most powerful one. I am Jared, leader of Ventex 2. I take responsibility for all that displeases you. Please do not punish my people. Punish? Who said anything about punishing? I merely expect you and your end of your contract to be upheld. Jared says, thank you, Ardra. And Ardra says, don't talk like some ancient prophet around me with these and thous, and most powerful ones. It is appealing for a few centuries, but I bore easily. And stop cowering. When I want you on your knees, I'll let you know. Much better. A fine example for the others. Who would you be? So the fact that Worf buys this is disheartening. He should know better. Um, he says, "You are not Fek'lek," and she goes, "Ah, but I am. I'm the guardian of Gresso, where the dishonored go, where they die. But here on Ventex 2, I'm called Ardra, the same Ardra who negotiated a contract with these people 10 centuries ago today. Ah, you doubt me, a non-believer, really Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. No doubt you have traveled the galaxy and counted a diverse universe of creatures. Is there no rooms for the likes of me?" Because as I've encountered many with more credibility to be called the devil than you. Argus is the devil. Now there's one I haven't heard in a long time. Because as you claim you visited this planet 1,000 years ago and negotiated a contract. Argus, correct. That's it. I'd like to see this contract. Question. If she's a god like she says she is, could she not, like Hugh or Jeannie or Samantha Stevens, just snap her fingers and produce the contract? If she's the person she says she is, can she not just snap those little fingers and produce the contract? Here, this is what the contract says, with original signatures on it. Will her signature match the signature on the contract? They never bring this up. Are there pictures of her? This was a technologically advanced society. Are there not newspapers? Are there not pictures? Did they not shake hands? Is there no proof that it was actually physically her? See, they don't bring this up. Where are the pictures? Where are the proof? Where's the signature? Do the autographs match? Um, Jared said the scrolls of Ardra are a long-winded description of a very simple business arrangement. I did away with wars, famine, and economic ruin, and provided them 1,000 years of paradise. My terms were clearly stated. They went into this with their eyes open. I'm sure you'll find everything is in order. Picard says, "You won't mind if I don't like your word for it." Jared says, "With your permission, Picard says to Jared, "With your permission, I'd like Mr. Data to review these scrolls thoroughly." Jared said, "It is no longer my decision." Audrey says, "I have intrigued you, haven't I, Picard?" Picard said, "I only am here to secure the release of the Federation hostages." Hostages? What hostages? Yes, Audrey, panic gripped the people as the time of your return grew closer. Audrey, yes, I do have that effect on people. Now see that the hostages are released. Jared said immediately. He's such a wimp. He's such a wimp, and he's been brainwashed to boot. Because, I'm going to make you part of my video. Every single time I do a video, regardless of the time of day that I do said video, she goes off. I'm going to start bringing her to my videos. She doesn't tell time. Can't contact the Enterprise. Advise Dr. Clark that the hostages are being released. Dr. Clark comes over, voiceover. "This is Clark. You did it, Captain. Thank goodness." Picard says goodness had nothing to do with it. Enterprise 3 to beam up. Mr. Data will remain on the planet surface. Data, I want a complete report on the contents of these documents. I refuse to abandon this planet to that woman. Okay. So then we're back in the observation lounge. Riker says, "Could she be another refugee from the Q?" Beverly says, "For that matter, could she be a Q?" Picard says Q would never bother with contracts or economic forecasts. Picard said, "I noticed that too, Kansa. I had the distinct feeling we were in the presence of a flim-flam artist." Worf says, "But her powers." Now see, he should know better. He's got Star Trek experience. He's seen the transporter beam. He's seen the holodeck. He should know better. Picard says her powers are at best unclear. Think about it. Worf, transporter technology can make things appear and disappear. The illusion that she can turn herself into a Klingon creature could be accomplished by a holographic projection. Dr. Clark says, and creating a minor tremor could be the result of a low-frequency tractor being projected against the tectonic plates. Picard said, "We are capable of creating all of these events. It's just that she dresses them up and delivers them with dramatic flair." Beverly says, like a musician, a magician. Picard says, exactly. She has an incredible focused mind. It was virtually impossible to sense any deception or anything else for that matter. Geordi says, the best musicians won't ever let you see what's up their sleeve, counselor. Riker says she must be tapping into some sort of power source to produce those effects. She's not hiding that up her sleeve. Picard says, number one, I want you and Mr. Worf to run a high-resolution scan of the star system. Look for a ship, base of power, operation, anything large enough to generate that power. Mr. LaForge, accompany Dr. Clark back to the science station. See if you can trace the origin of the tremors. Uh, Computer voice says there's an intruder on board. And she's all sitting comfy cozy in his chair. Audra says, your chair offers a lovely view of my planet. Picard, come sit with me. Picard says, either leave my bridge or I will remove you by force. Audra says, by force? You disappoint me. You didn't strike me but as that sort, Picard, but try all means. Worf goes after her. She's got a personal force field. Audra says, I was really hoping you'd try it yourself. Picard says, transport her room 3, lock onto the intruder, and transport her to the planet's surface. The voice says, aye, sir. Picard says, Ensign, I want shields up until further notice. I turn around and look at the ensign, and it's her. So then, which turns around, it's Audra. Riker says, we are not impressed by your Micah tricks. Audra says, I pity you. We live in a universe of magic, which evidently you cannot see. I remember the Doctor's hollow emitter on Voyager. Reminds me of that. Audra, my pale friend, have you finished your examining the contract? Data says I have. Picard says, report, Data. Data says the contract does agree to deliver the people of Ventex 2 into the personal servitude of Ardra at the end of 1,000 years of peace. I have compared the terms to the body of laws which govern the planet, the language of the agreement incorrect in every detail. Ardra said, speed and accuracy, you are too talented to be human. Data says, I am Android. Data says, Android, of course, how wonderful, an unexpected bonus. Riker says, bonus? When the contract came to term, I gained clear title to the planet, everything on the surface, in the air or orbit. You see, the Enterprise belongs to me now as well. Data says, I'm afraid the contract could be interpreted that way. He gets his turn at the acting thing. He does a good job of going with, without saying anything, what happened to me. He does a really good acting job, though. I was impressed. So, like I said, both guys get a little extra. They get a couple of scenes together, and then they get one solo scene, which is good. So they're all getting their bonus, bragging rights. Because I was on Star Trek, and I even got a little extra exposure. Like I said, I want to see the signatures. I want to see the photos. You sign a big treaty like this, you take photos. Where was the photo op? You don't see any of that here. And there's a voice overview. Although I consider this woman's claim upon my ship to be an empty threat, it has further inspired my determination to expose her for the fraud she is. He calls Data to his room. Data says, you wish to see me, sir. Picard says, yes, Mr. Data. A wise man once said there's a sucker born every minute. Data says, P.T. Barnum, sir. Again, we're back in this century. We're doing a lot of 1900 references here. I've been examining the dynamics of what was used to be called the con game. Quite fascinating and worthy of your study, Data. Do you believe Ardra is, to use the vernacular, a con artist, sir? Yes, I do, Data, and I believe it is our job to out-con the con artist. Sir, if I must point out that Ventexians did have 1,000 years of peace and tranquility, as Ardra promised. Because we can only speculate about what happened on that planet 1,000 years ago, Data. Maybe a Ventaxian leader saw the destruction of his society at hand and conceived this contract of Ardra to motivate change. Or maybe they really was an Ardra of some sort who was the basis of this myth. Who knows? The point is, somehow a fundamental theology was created that transformed this society, but in the process of change created this latent fear that which has been passed down through generations. Data says, from your experience of performing Ebenezer Scrooge, you're aware how fear can be a very powerful motivator. Data says, yes, indeed, sir. In the story, the spirits use fear to motivate Scrooge to reform his character. Picard says, in the hands of a con artist, fear can be used to motivate obedience, calculation, the exploitation of innocent people, and that's what I believe has happened here. I intend to prove that I need to find a loophole, some way of challenging the validity of the contract. Data says, sir, the language seems carefully chosen to avoid any loopholes. Picard says, check it again and check every Vitaxian legal precedent for the last 1,000 years. We'll talk again in the morning. Aye, sir. And he leaves. So then he's sleeping. He fell asleep reading a book. He's got a book on his chest. And then she appears in his quarters. Audrey says, I've arranged for a bit of privacy, just the two of us. Picard says, this is becoming very tiresome. Oh, come on now, Picard. You find me tantalizing, given into your desires. Picard says, there's nothing about you I find tantalizing. On the contrary, I find you obvious and vulgar. Audrey says, easily fixed. I can be your ideal woman, Picard. Prim and proper and chaste until I succumb to your charms, or would you fantasize turn more towards a professional woman? One perhaps who wears a Starfleet uniform. Alright, so here's the prim and proper. Now, this is where the writers went wrong. Now, Ardra has only seen Troy. So that's my assumption here as to why this happened. But if the writers had been intelligent, they'd have chosen Beverly Crusher for this role. See Picard season 3 and see, they've had little tete-a-tetes in the past on this season. They've had little romantic dinners and they've talked about this. So using Beverly Crusher would have been much, much better. But using Troy, who we know is with Riker, although the writers are going to throw other people at us as the seasons progress. And then we won't get to a true Riker Troy thing until the movies, and then Picard season 3. Well, they make a guest appearance in the earlier seasons, but those two seasons don't. Picard 1 and 2 just don't count. Just eliminate. Just don't. The only season that counts is, as a fan, the only season that counts is season 3. Period. End. And if they ever do anything afterwards, we'll see how that goes. I'm still rooting for SG1 to come back, and the hoopla on that one is just. But like I said, this you would have bought it more if this had been Beverly Crusher. I'm just saying. Oh, I forgot the rest. Oh no, I didn't. I got it. Roger beams him down to the surface. Geordi says, Captain Picard, I wasn't expecting you. Picard says, neither was I. LaForge to Enterprise. Worf comes on. Go ahead. Geordi, Worf, the captain said you'd better beam him back on board. Worf's convoy, the captain, but I have no. Picard said, it's all right, Worf. Audrey somehow transported me down here. Beam me directly to my quarters. Worf's convoys, we've locked onto you. Transporters are malfunctioning, Captain. Some sort of interference. Checking. Picard says, just have Mr. Data fetch me in a shuttle and have him bring a uniform. Worf's voice says, a uniform? Picard says, yes, I did. Worf says, aye, sir. Again, she's going off. So then Picard and Data are on the shuttlecraft. Picard says, LaForge and Dr. Clark have made no headway. Commander Riker and Lieutenant Worf have not picked up anything on their scans. Data says, I believe if I have found an obscure precedent in Vitaxian law that may be of interest. Picard says, yes. Data says the case involves a contract dispute over services rendered by a Klingon craftsman on the construction of a Vitaxian home. Because the dispute involved an alien culture, the parties decided that arbitration rather than the courts would resolve the issue. Both parties agreed to choose an arbitrator. It is only known case involving an alien claimant. Picard says, "That's exactly what I need. Well done." And they try to get on the Enterprise, and the Enterprise has disappeared. Back on the science station, Data says, "I cannot locate the Enterprise anywhere within 1 light year of the planet." Picard says, "I don't believe Andrea is capable of transporting the Enterprise a light year away. Continue hailing them, Mr. Data. Repeat on all frequencies." Geordi says, "Hey, I think we found something. There is a sudden jump in the Z particle readings just about the time the Enterprise disappeared." Picard said, "Where did it originate?" Dr. Clark said it was too brief to pinpoint. Geordi says, "But it could suggest a hidden power source." Picard says, "Gentlemen, I need to find that source in order to defeat this woman." Jody says, "Well, if you can get her to perform a few more magic tricks like that one, we just might be able to track it down." Here, so I trust you have a bit more respect for me now. Picard says, "What have you done with my ship, Ardra?" Ardra says, "I have done nothing with your ship. My ship is safely in my possession." Picard says, "I do not recognize your claim on the Enterprise or this world for that matter, and in accordance with the Vectaxian legal precedents, I call for an arbitration." Audrey says, "An arbitration? There is nothing here to arbitrate, Picard." "Oh, but there is. If you're a fraud, ma'am, I intend to prove you could not have affected the changes that took place on this planet." Audrey says, "Do you not believe what you see with your own eyes? Your ship is gone, Captain." Picard says, "An illusion. Magicians have been making things of all sorts disappear for ages." Audra says, "Oh, you underestimate me, but then most people do until it's too late." Picard says, "If you are who you say you are, you have nothing to lose." Audra says, "I have also nothing to gain. I already have possession of this planet and your ship." Picard says, "I am prepared to offer an incentive. If you win, I will take you to the ruins of Legilium." And supposedly being a god, wouldn't she know where this stuff was? Why would she need his help to find it? Just saying. She says, "The Vadal Emerald, you know where it is?" Picard says, "I do." Audra says, "Oh, you're too clever, Captain, but I have enough jewels. If you wish this foolish arbitration, I will choose my own prize." And Picard says, "And what will that be?" "You. All right, your body is already mine, but I want more. I want your heart, your mind, your soul. I want you to give them to me without resistance of your own free will. Do you still wish to pursue this most dangerous game?" Picard says, "I agree to your terms." And I'm sitting there going, huh? All right, I know there's some of you out there that think that Patrick Stewart is a sex symbol and you are entitled to feel the way you feel. I would buy this better if it was Jonathan Frakes or Adrian Paul back in the day, or Sean Cassidy or Patrick Cassidy, David Cassidy, or any guy from an 80s hair band. Have you seen those guys in the 80s with the hair, with the have you seen any guy that plays a vampire with the hair? Young guy, the Salvatore brothers from Vampire Diaries. It just doesn't work for me. But she's got the hots of him just like Troy's mother. Oh, I forgot. She says, "Oh, Picard, I will enjoy you morning, noon, and night." Picard says, "But we must agree on an arbiter." Audrey says, "Very well, I choose Mr. Data. Any objections?" Picard says, "Mr. Data, he is a member of my crew." Audrey says, "Of my crew, and he's an android. He's incapable of deceit or bias. He has no feelings to get in the way of this." Data says, "Audrey, before he responds, may I have a word in private with Captain Picard?" She says, "Yes." Um, Data says, "Sir, I request that you reject me as an arbiter." Picard says, "Why?" Audra is right. If I am chosen, I will perform my duties without bias or sentiment. I cannot guarantee that I will deliver a verdict in your favor. Picard says, "Data, where else on this planet will I find someone that she cannot intimidate?" Data, "Sir, I have to precisely follow the rules of the conduct for the vaccine jurist." Picard says, "I understand. You will make a fine judge. I accept Data as an arbiter." And then the hearing begins. Barrett says, "1,000 years ago, our planet was dying, overcrowded and dangerous city-states warred unceasingly with each other. The air and water were polluted with industrial waste. There was a constant threat of starvation and epidemic." Audra said, then what happened? Jared said, and then you came. Picard says, objection. There is no conclusive evidence that this woman visited this planet 1,000 years ago. Picard says, Audra says, I suppose you want a 1,000-year-old witness. Picard said that would be quite acceptable. Audra says, Jared, in the contract, does it specify how you would know me when I return? Yes, by the date and anything else, by the shaking of the cities, by the visions, and all of the things that occurred on schedule. Jared says, yes. Audra says, thank you, Anna. I submit I've established my identity as stated by the contract. Um, Data says, Captain Picard, my interpretation of the vaccine law suggests under these circumstances this is acceptable and your objection is overruled. So once again, what does history say she looked like? Is there a physical description of her anywhere in their histories? Did a newspaper take pictures? Do they have any documentation? Can they prove her signature? It doesn't. They didn't live in the time of Nostradamus where there was none of these items. They lived in an industrial time. They should have had newspapers or some kind of news or some kind of television, some kind of something, and they should have had a physical picture of this woman, and they don't bring it up anytime. So I'm just saying. Picard says, but your honor. Data says, sir, I have ruled, sit down. He says to Ardra, you may proceed. Ardra says, thank you. When I first set foot on Ventex 2, what did I offer you people? Jared said, according to the scrolls, you offered to give us 1,000 years of peace and prosperity if we would promise to surrender ourselves to you at the end of the term. Ardra says, now why do you think they would strike such a bargain? Jared said, we'd nothing to lose. There was no hope in sight. Ardra said, until I came along. Picard says, objection. Ardra says, I withdraw the observation. No further questions. Picard, your honor, nothing in this testimony proves that Ardra herself has any power to affect the lives of the Ventaxians. My opponent has failed to prove her case, and I therefore move that the claim be summarily dismissed. And I wrote all this up as I was watching it, so I had yet to see the next scene. But before we got to the next scene, I was ranting and raving. What did she do? Did she snap her fingers and the planet became like it is now? Was it a gradual change over time? Did the habitants do it on their own? I had this big rant, and then, of course, later on, Data says, I find no cause to invalidate the contract at this time. Arbitration will continue. Audra says, Your Honor, Captain Picard, as a new visitor to my planet, has been a consistent doubter of my abilities. I'd like to ask him a few questions, if I may. Data says, it is highly irregular to question the opposing advocate, but I see no reason to deny it. Proceed. Audra says, please don't take any offense at these questions. You know how fond of you I am. Picard says, objection. Data says, abstain. The advocate will refrain from expressing personal affection for her opponent. Audra says, you don't believe my powers are real. Do you? No, I don't. Then may I ask you to explain this? And she does this all these tricks, and she changes into all this stuff, and then she rests her case, and then back at the science station, Dr. Clark says the decay rate of these Z particles makes it almost impossible to trace the source. Jordy says, I'm correlating particle trajectories. They're beginning to align. Wait a minute. I've got coordinates 34 degrees north, 62 east, at an altitude of 210 kilometers. Dr. Clark says that would put it in orbit above the western magnetic pole. Running visual scan, they find nothing. Jordy says, this time I don't buy the magic. Something's got to be there. See, then Picard asked the questions that I wanted answered previously. Jared, you have described quite thoroughly the history of your people before and after Ardra's visit, but I am simply unclear on the change itself. Did Ardra simply snap her fingers, transforming Ventrax into paradise? No, the changes occurred gradually over a long period of time. Well, duh! That means she didn't do it. You did it, not her. You did it. Get it through your head. Jared, because did she personally reform the government that has peacefully ruled Ventex 2 for a millennium? He's like, no. Historical records indicate a council was convened to assess our options. They drew up a new constitution, which the population later ratified. Picard, I see. So she advised this council. Jared's like, no. Then she must have destroyed all weapons on the planet. No. Our leaders did that. Again, well then, let's move on to the environmental. How were the accomplished? Jared said we shifted our economy from an industrial to an agrarian base that was more ecological sound. But Ardra must have at least purified the water. He's like, no, records showed that there was a series of initiatives converting everything from atmospheric contaminants to waste disposal. Picard says, did Ardra pick up even one piece of trash? Jared said, Ardra left Ventex 2 before the environmental reforms began. Picard says, excuse me, but it sounds as if with a lot of courage and hard work, your ancestors changed this world all by themselves. Ardra says, objection. The advocate is drawing conclusions. Data says, sustained. I would draw my own conclusions if you don't mind. Picard says, no further questions. Data says, rebuttal. Ardra says, just a question. Is there any doubt? She's going off again. Is there any doubt in your mind at all that if I had not intervened, the terrible conditions here would have continued? I remind you that you are under oath. No doubt at all. Huh? You just said that your people did this, and your people did that, and your people did this, and your people did that. She had nothing to do with it. Okay, maybe she inspired the change, but she didn't do any of the changes. The man has brainwashed himself. So LaForge comes in, and they have a little talk, and so then Geordi comes in, and they have a little private talk, and Geordi tells her that they have a Romulan cloaking device, and they have found the Enterprise and how she was doing it, and then he says, can you do this thing for me? And he says, yes, of course we can do this thing for you. And then we go back to the questioning. And Picard says, Jared, you're a wise and experienced leader. I would guess you would trust your senses. Jared says, yes. And all your senses tell you that this woman here is the most powerful force on this planet, don't they? Jared says, yes. Picard, what would I say if I could told you that Ardra has no powers whatsoever? But Jared says, we have seen her powers right here. Ardra says, that's right, you will again. Picard says, Ardra's magic, Jared. Would you believe me if I told you I could do it? And he waves his hand, and there's the tremors, and then he changes into the creatures, and then he asks her to do something, and she can't do something, and they go through this big thing. Jared doesn't believe him for a second, and then he does all the demonstrations, and then Picard says, recognize the old bag of tricks. How about this one? Come back if you can. He makes her disappear. No, fine, allow me. She comes back. And she says impudence, and Picard says impudence. Impudence is pretending to be a feckler of the Klingon. Captain says your leeway has run out. Data says your leeway has run out. Picard says, Your Honor, I appreciate the court's indulgence. Allow me to explain. A team of the Enterprise has taken control of this woman's ship in orbit around Ventex 2. Thank you for your help, number one. Riker's voice says, glad to be of service, sir. Picard says they have monitoring me on my computer and executing a prearranged program on her ship's computer, fairly ingenious combination of force field projections, holograph, and transporter effects. Ardra controls the magic literally by the blink of an eye. Centuries-old technology, an implant that allows her eye movement to choose and activate each illusion. She once told us that she is known by many names. At least she has been honest about that. Her crew has admitted she has, in fact, 23 aliases in this sector alone. Adra says you have no right. Picard says deceiving innocent people in petty shames for years. Ventex 2 offered her the greatest opportunity of her nefarious career. She learned about the myth, Ardra studied it, and expertly played out on your fears until your people were ready to virtually surrender to her. Ardra says, Your Honor, under the circumstances, I believe it is only fair that I release Ventex from their obligation, and I will even let them keep the peace they have, and I'll just be on my way. Dennis says, with the advocate's withdrawal, the contract is hereby dissolved. This arbitration is adjourned. Jared says, thank you, Captain. You save lives. Because says, no, Jared, I have tried to tell you, you saved your own lives a long time ago. Jared says, congratulations, sir. Ardra says, you would have had more fun if you lost. Until we meet again, Jean-Luc Picard of Starship Enterprise. So that's the end of Devil's Due. I hope you enjoyed it. We will come back next week for Clues, First Contact, and Galaxy's Child. They should be some good episodes. I'm looking forward to First Contacting, but that'll be in a couple of weeks. We got to do First Clues first. I'm doing them in order. Just for Season 4, Episode 187. And that's a wrap. And please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Thank you.